Conditional locks was a major enhancement to Elektron sequencers a few years ago, and I remember upgrading the OS on my analog 4 and thinking, wow, this takes the sequencer to a new level. If you've bought an Elektron machine recently, you've maybe had a play with it, because it's also a feature on the Digitakt, the Digitone and the analog Rytm. I'll skim over the absolute basics of it quite briefly in case you're new to Elektron, but I'll also throw in a couple of tips about using it to produce musically interesting patterns, so I hope this might be of interest if you're already familiar with it. I've got a 16-step pattern here that sounds quite nice, but it gets a bit boring fairly quickly, so let's do a bit more work on it. I'll go into record mode so we can see the trigs. I'm also in the note page, and the parameter we're interested in is this one. It's called trig condition. Let's take this note on step 3 and add a lock. So there are quite a few options, and I'm not going to go through them all. So let's set it to 33%. And you can hear that it only triggers 33% of the time. It can be a bit unpredictable. Sometimes it'll trigger several times in a row and then you don't hear it at all, seemingly for ages, which you might decide is fine from a musical point of view. Now here's my first tip. It can be quite fun to put other parameter locks onto the note that only sounds occasionally. But if you can't predict the next time you're going to hear it, it can be a little bit frustrating setting your locks. So what I do is set the other locks first, and then I set the condition. So I'll clear the condition, so you hold down the trig button and push-click the parameter. And now I'll muck about with the other locks. So let's go into the filter page, a little bit more filter envelope depth. A bit more of that one as well. Go into the amp page, give it a bit more reverb. Might want to take the volume down a bit. A bit more delay as well. Okay, let's go back to the note page and give it a condition. I'll put a different condition on that trig now. Let's try one of 2. Now 1 of 2 means that the note will play on the first of 2 cycles of the pattern. 2 out of 2 means it'll play the second time of 2 cycles of the pattern. That's what each of these pairs of numbers mean. Let's set it to 4 of 4. No, 4 of. That's 4 of 4. And that means it'll play on the 4th of 4 cycles of the pattern. Now this group of 3 trigs here, I'll set some conditions on all 3. I'm going to set this one to it to, let's have it of 2 of 4. Oh dear, where are we? 2 of 4. I'll set this one to a bit further into the menu. 4 of 8. And this one to 2 of 2. This in fact is my next tip. Musically, it seems to me better to have the downbeats playing more often than the offbeats. I found that if I had a downbeat, say this one on step 9, playing less often than the one next to it on the quarter beat, the melody could sound a bit disjointed and less satisfying to listen to. So the way I've set these 3 locks means that the downbeat on step 9 plays more often than the half beat, which plays more often than the quarter beat. And every few cycles all three will play, and you get the da-da-da phrase. There it goes. So let's go to step 16, which is the upbeat into the next cycle, and set it to 4 of 4 if I can find it. 3 of 4, 4 of 4, there it is. Now I think that's sounding quite a bit more interesting than what we started with, and it seems like a longer pattern than just 16 steps, although of course it is still 16 steps, one page. Now what these locks don't give you is variations on the notes. So what we could do now, I'll just press stop for a second, is expand the pattern to 32 steps. So I hit function page and press page once. This duplicates the first 16 steps onto page 2, so we'll come out of there and go to page 2. Now the pattern won't actually sound any different yet because the two pages are identical. But we're in page 2 and I can edit it and bring in some variation. Of course, if you spent more time on this, you could probably improve on it, and you might find that as you change some of the notes on page 2, you might want to revisit page 1 and tweak that as well, as it will take on a different shape. So that's conditional locks and how useful they are.